I think I know almost everybody, but I have not met all the incoming students. My name is Remco Zekers, Associate Director for Education at FRIB here. If you haven't met Pablo yet, Pablo is sitting in the back.
Hello, I just was eating brownie.
We are going to, we're actually broadcasting on Zoom this session, and before I introduce our speaker, we will at the end, if you're hesitant to have your voice on the Q&A, I'm sure there will be many questions. At the end of the session, we'll close the recording. So if you want to wait with your question until the end, you're very welcome. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julie Rojewski from the Graduate School. She's the Director for Graduate Career Development, which is the reason why we're in this room today. One of the things that, when we do the annual survey, you fill out, some people complain about it, but it's actually very important. And I looked at what you said you would like to hear more about, and almost all the feedback I got was related to career development, which is why I wanted to make this part of today's retreat. So that's great. And we have the expert here. Actually, some of you might have joined, if you have been here for a little while, and you joined one of the earlier career events that we had maybe 2 or 3 years ago when we were discussing about networking, I believe. Yeah. You might have met Julie before. So, but today is a little bit broader than that. So, and I hope there are many questions. This is really for you. So please make sure to make good use of it.
Thank you.
Good to you.
I have the coveted after lunch spot. So we're all going to do our best to keep each other's energy up. And so when I ask questions, I will wait until I get answers. So try to play along. That's all I ask. So yes, I'm Julie Rojewski. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Development at the Graduate School. And so I have the great privilege of working with graduate students across disciplines in the hopes that every Spartan who graduates from a graduate program here at Michigan State does so with a really good idea of how they want to contribute their talents to the world, and then the experiences and knowledge they need to pursue any number of jobs, right? So that's a big task, but today we're going to talk about a couple of specific things that I hope will get you thinking about the many possible career paths that you might have coming from your FRIB training, right? So I realized when I saw this slide up here, I was like, oh, I never went back and actually put a proper opening slide. So let that be a lesson. If you have a placeholder opening slide, make sure you go back and fix it. But this is what we're going to be doing. All right, so our objectives for today are to think about how we can reframe the academic experiences we have as graduate students into something that is relevant and appealing for industry roles. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about crafting effective resumes. We're going to talk about interviewing, which is something that some people had indicated some interest in. And then job search methods if we have time. There will be plenty of time for questions. I'm hoping for full participation, but I'm also aiming for nothing short of a mindset shift. Right? At the end of this, I hope that you take all of this knowledge that we're going to go over in the next hour and a half and think about how you can spend the rest of your time in graduate school taking advantage of opportunities, thinking about the skills that you're developing, and really considering who you are becoming as an emerging professional and how you can take those talents with you into any number of roles, be it in academia or in industry, government, whatever. So one of the biggest differences between academia and industry is the balance and emphasis in knowledge and skills, right? In academic spaces, what you know and what you can sort of talk about in the information that you're able to share with other people in your fields is the currency that you trade, right? I'm being very generic when I say these kinds of things. I know there's a lot, our academic lives are much richer than that, but there's an emphasis on knowledge. If you go into an industry space, what you know is important. Even more important is what you can do, what you can contribute to a company or an organization that is looking to hire you. And so I really want you to keep in mind that trying to balance the knowledge that you're gaining as you're doing your research and as you're undergoing the rest of your training, but also focusing on quantifying and keeping track of the skills you're developing along the way and taking advantage of opportunities to develop new skills, to make different kinds of contributions, not just getting smarter, not just getting deeper in your area of expertise. And normally we talk about this, what we call a T-shaped individual. Does anyone or everyone hopefully know who that guy is? Okay, so I'm seeing some nodding. There will come a point when he is no longer the cultural icon that he is, but that's Mr. T from the team, which is what, like late 70s, early 80s, cultural icon. All right, when we talk about being a T-shaped individual, right? And a T-shaped individual is someone who has depth as well as breadth, right? The depth is it says at least one discipline and at least one system. For people who are in graduate school, especially those earning a PhD, that depth is just like, that is what we do, right? We drill down, you end up writing a dissertation on something that is very deep and very specific within an area of knowledge. But to be effective across potential job categories, you also need to have those skills and competencies across the top. And these are what we call boundary crossing competencies, right? These are skills and competencies that can be useful in academia, of course, but are also useful in industry. They're useful in government. They're things like teamwork, communication, project management. Right, what else is up there? Critical thinking, global understanding. Many of you I know are not from the United States. That kind of cross-global knowledge and experience is valuable in a lot of domains, and it's something that you should highlight and emphasize. But as you go through the process of becoming deep, I also want you to think about making sure that that T balances out, because that the depth and breadth of your T is what's going to create opportunities. I know I have a clicker. So let's talk. When we think about what it means to be good, are you all physicists? If I say that you're all physicists, does that make sense? Or like, is somebody who would be like, no, I am definitely not that. Okay, what are you?
We're cryo.
You're what?
Engineers.
Oh, okay, so engineers, okay. Anyone else wanna? So I'll try to say physicists and engineers. Okay. All right, so when we talk about the people we work with or the people in our field, be they physicists or engineers, right? What did you say, a cryo something?
Yeah, we're in the cryogenics group. But yeah, it sounds fancy, but
It does sound fancy. I just like to say that word. Okay. So when we think about our colleagues in the worlds we're entering in our academic spaces, how do we know if someone is good at their job? This is a question I'm asking, like, for answers on. How do you know if someone is at the top of their field? How do you know? There's no wrong answer. Yes.
Reputation.
Reputation. Okay, so say more about that. Like, how do you know if someone has a good reputation?
If they have contributed enough in their field to gain a name.
Okay, so contribute enough to their field to have a name in that field. Okay, so that's what you mean by reputation. I saw another hand over here. Was it you? I don't know.
Yeah, it was me. Nobel Prize.
Okay, a Nobel Prize. Yeah. You assume that means they're good at their. Yeah, that is
Some others like
If you get a
industry.
Nobel Prize, you can go anywhere with it.
Yeah. But I bet that was my dumb answer. The more competent thought out answer is some sort of like industry recognition or yeah.
But prizes, really, especially those that are very prestigious prizes, recognition of that kind. Okay. What else? I see a hand in the back.
People go to them to solve problems.
People go to them to solve problems. That's a good one. Yep. What else?
well, ultimately your references, so that is the other people who will speak for you.
So how people talk about you, that sort of ties in with reputation, but exactly like how your persona is extended beyond your actual, sort of your initial space. Okay, any other ideas?
You can sort of tell by how they talk about what they do usually.
How they talk about it, right? Do they seem knowledgeable? Are they confident in the way they discuss their work? That kind of thing. Okay. Any other ideas? When we think about job searching or designing a career, right? Your reputation, of course, matters. This is tip one. The world is a lot smaller than we imagine it to be. And the older you're, the longer you live, the more you'll realize the world is quite small. So your reputation is definitely something you're gonna want to keep track of. But there's also ways that we talk about it in the form of documents, right? So you have to think about when your reputation and how people talk about you is not enough. We also have these documents that we use to quantify and capture our impact. Okay, so we're going to talk now about CVs and resumes. Another interactive portion. Okay, so does everyone know what a CV and a resume are? And that they are, and first of all, does everyone know that CVs and resumes are two different things? Yes. Yes, okay, that's an enthusiastic yes. Thank you, Pablo. Okay, now we're going to talk about the difference, because this difference, we're going to actually talk a lot about resumes, and you're going to think, why are we emphasizing resumes so much? One, because I want you to have the technical knowledge to write a good resume, but it's also going to help you identify gaps in your own experience where you're going to want to spend some time beefing that up while you're in grad school. And it's also going to help you think about what we talked about at the beginning, the balance between knowledge and skills. And CVs and resumes are both documents that can be used to convey to someone that you are good at your job. But what do they do? So what is a CV trying to communicate? We can go slowly through this first. Okay. It proves that you're an expert in your field, right? Someone who's got, Remco, how long is your CV? I'm just putting you on the spot. Would you guess? You've been at this
Pages or something
Huh?
like that. I don't know.
What did you say?
Couple of pages.
It's only a couple pages?
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely longer than that, right? So some people in this building, their CV is probably like 40 pages or more, right? Super long. The longer you're in this field, the longer your CV gets, right? And at the early part of your career, they're probably shorter. This makes sense. And we'll talk about that in a second. So what do you think a resume is trying to communicate?
Sort of like how your skills can be tailored to something.
Yes, exactly. Proves that you can do the job, right? So a CV just like lists all of the things that you've done. A resume is more targeted because you're trying to demonstrate not only that you have all of these great skills and knowledge, but that you can do the job that you're applying for. All right. So what is a CV about? Who's the focus of a CV?
Me.
Yes, absolutely. It is all about you, like only about you. Look at all these amazing things that I've done. Maybe your collaborators are also in there, but it's mostly like, look at how amazing I am. What about a resume?
Job?
It's focused on the job and the employer, right? It shows that what you have is relevant to their needs. Okay. The CV is all about you. The job, the resume should be about the person that you're hoping brings you into an organization.
I'm going to mess up with the lights a little bit to see if I can lower the lights there. So
Sure, yeah,
don't mind me as I
sounds good.
light changes.
How long should a CV be? We already talked about this a little bit, but how long do you think a CV should be? Yeah.
1 page.
You think it should be 1 page? Okay, I see some more hands. Just shout it out.
As long as it needs to be.
As long as it needs to be, right? So, but a resume, how long should a resume be? 1 to 2 pages. Yeah, oh, sorry. Thank you for raising your hand. Yeah, a resume should only be 1 to 2 pages is concise. A CV is exhaustive. You can literally put everything on there and you just keep adding to it throughout your career. Whereas a resume, you're constantly revisiting, which I think gives you the next answer. Okay. What should a CV include?
Everything.
Everything. Right. What does everything include for your CV? Just like
Education.
education,
Positions.
position you had. Big awards, I heard. Okay, what else?
Publications.
Every publication you've ever done, including those that are not yet published, yes.
Presentation.
Presentations.
Conferences.
Say that loud.
Conferences.
References, yeah.
Awards?
Awards, grants you've gotten,
Potentially
students you've
publications.
supervised. What was that?
Potentially publications.
Potential publications, new lines of inquiry. It can be like literally everything related to the work that you do. How about a resume? Shout it out. What do you think goes on a resume?
Skills.
Skills, right? Results, impacts, experiences you've had, actual professional experiences. And so you can sort of see they're not quite the same thing. Your experiences come from the experience, come from the process of developing the products that appear on your CV, but you're emphasizing them differently. When should you edit and update your CV?
Whenever you do a new thing.
Whenever you do a new thing, yeah, for people who are really on top of it, like literally they're in there all the time adding all the things that they're doing. I saw a hand. Anything to add?
No, it was the same as that.
Okay, yeah. Realistically, how often do you update? Pablo, Remco, would you say?
Once per year?
Yeah, I know. Usually the answer is like, I should do it more often, but usually I do it just before annual review. And then I have to go back and remember all of the things that I did and try to make sure that they're on there, right? Learn from us, do it more regularly. Anytime you've got something to add, just dump it in there. All right, keep it up to date. You can use it for anything and everything. What about a resume? When should you edit and update your resume?
When you learn a new skill.
When you learn a new skill, yep.
When you apply to a different job.
You apply for a different job, okay.
When you need to use it, because they're for.
Yep. Every single job should have an updated resume. You remember nothing else, it is this. Whereas you can use the same CV for every academic post that you're going after, you're just gonna attach it as part of your dossier. You should be updating and refining your resume for every single job that you go after, if it's in industry, government, or sort of non-faculty roles. Right, questions so far? Then we're gonna talk some more about resumes. So some really basic resume fundamentals. Who here has a resume or who's ever created one? Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of good hands come up. This might be redundant, but it's always useful to talk about modern expectations around resumes. The basics, your contact information, do not put your home address. It used to be that they would recommend putting your home address on your resume. That is no longer relevant. Do include where you're geographically located. And if you are located in two different places, like maybe you're from another part of the country or the world, but you're here for school and you can put both, right? You need an email address, one that you check regularly and that you will get to keep even after you leave your current. So while you're a grad student, you can use your MSU email address, but as you get closer to finishing, I recommend that you pivot to sort of a more generic one, and you don't risk losing access to your emails once you're on the job market, okay? Your phone number, obviously. If you have a link, you should have a LinkedIn. We're not going to talk about it, but you can include your LinkedIn profile. If you have a GitHub, if that applies to you, or if you have a personal website, that's good to include as contact information. But the big one is no pictures. In the United States, we do not put pictures on resumes. And then just and no addresses. So those are kind of two big updates. And then nothing from high school. Sometimes people have, unless it was like if you won a Nobel Prize in high school, then you can put that on it. Once you're past undergraduate, you want to jettison anything that was before your undergraduate days. Okay. Yeah, is there a question? Oh, yeah.
So say we get to the end of our PhD.
Yes.
And we have that conferred. Do you put doctor before your name, or do you just have that in your education?
That's kind of personal preference. I mean, sometimes I rarely see doctor. You'll see PhD at the end. I don't have it in mind now that you say that, but I don't know that there was any particular reason for it. If the job you're applying for requires a PhD, you're going to definitely want it and to highlight that you have that. But if it doesn't, that can be a strategic decision that you make.
Question.
Yes.
When you said in the top, you mean like where your full name goes?
Yes. So
full name, PhD.
yes, right. Yeah, you could put it up there. And then of course it'll be also under education. But if you really want to emphasize that you have a PhD in hand, obviously don't put it on there until you actually have done all of the things, because that can be awkward if there's any sort of hiccup or gap. But yes, you could put at the top your name, comma, PhD.
What if you had relevant experience in high school, for example, like you did an internship or you published papers that are relevant
To the job that you, so if that is the key that translates your experience to the job that you're applying for, then yes, you can go back to it. Like, let's say you had an internship at a national lab, and then you wanted to later apply to a different national lab, then you could mention that. But really only things that are very specifically relevant. Otherwise, so the logic is multi-part, right? Part of it is you only have so much space, and logically you're going to have a lot of experience as an undergraduate and graduate school that should be taking up that space. But if you have something that is very specifically relevant, then you can reach back into high school. And for publications, resumes don't have as much emphasis on publications. In your CV, of course, you can have that because you can have that as long as you want. But again, be mindful of the space more than anything.
In your experience for like technical post PhD fields, are cover letters still like trendy? And if so, is it rhetorically apt to try and emphasize the same details across your resume and your cover letters?
So cover letters are in a weird flux moment right now. So some people say they're not, like, don't waste your time. If your resume is strong and sharp enough, then that should be adequate. I think there's still room for cover letters, and there's a couple of reasons why. More than once, I have heard recruiters talk about how if there is a cover letter and they don't want it, they just don't read it. But if there isn't a cover letter and they're expected to see one, they see that as a drawback. So there's sort of like almost no harm in having a cover letter. Secondly, your cover letter, and I don't have a ton of space dedicated to this, but we can talk about it, and then we can come back to it too. But cover letters should be used to convey either additional information that is relevant or really emphasize information from your resume that you want to draw attention to, right? In like one example that I have is a student who worked for me. She finished her PhD and she was moving to Seattle because that's where her husband's family was, and they had decided that's where they were going to be. So she used her cover letter to explain, even though she was from Boston and she was educated in East Lansing, she was targeting her job search in Seattle. And she said, like, I'm moving to Seattle in July of whatever year. And so I'm really excited that this position is, aligns with my skills and whatever. So that's a way that you can sort of get that information in, because it wouldn't be in your resume unless you listed like a 2-part location. But yeah, a cover letter is a way that you can sort of communicate more information that's not in your resume, highlight specific information that is in your resume, or communicate there's more flexibility for like personality.
What goes into a good summary?
A good summary? I'm glad you asked, because a summary is another one of those things. Some people love them, some people hate them, but you should use that as a couple of sentences to talk about what you're trying to do, like where you want to pivot, right? So, a theoretical physicist with quantitative experience, like looking to leverage prior experience in the finance industry to join, I don't know, like that's the way that you can kind of articulate the journey that you're hoping to make from where you are now to the job that you're applying to. But if you don't have a summary, because that doesn't make sense for the role, or if you have so many other relevant experiences that you don't want to sacrifice the space for a summary, that's another area that you can take out. Okay, if you have more questions, you can come back. Under the education section, only institutions at which you earned a degree or you're in the process of earning a degree, right? So you can have PhD expected. But if you attended an institution but then transferred or left before earning a degree, don't include it unless you're applying for a job at that institution, right? But if you took a summer class at a community college to get yourself ahead on credits, like not worth the space. You should list the institution name, the location, when you graduated, what degree, and the major or minor, or you can see in the example, it's got thesis titles. If you have a thesis for any level, you can put that information in there. And for PhDs, education can either go in this front section or it can go at the bottom of the page or the bottom of the second page. That can be a strategic choice based on how you kind of want to communicate where you are and sort of the overall quality of the materials. use your space wisely. Unlike a CV, you cannot list everything that you have ever done. So you want to be very specific about only emphasizing the pieces of a job. So you're going to want to list all the jobs that you've had, but you want to emphasize the parts of the job that are relevant to the job you're applying for. And we're going to do a little experiment with that here in a second. All right. So when we talk about writing a good resume, what we encourage students to do is use the who method, right? So these bullet points that we talk about under research experience, graduate research, and you've got those bullet points. This is what we're talking about. Those bullet points should use the who method. What did you do? How did you do it? And what were the outcomes? Rather than just listing, here's the job that I had, or here are the tools that I used. You want to specifically highlight what tasks did you do? What projects did you work on? What skills or strategies, the how, right? We're emphasizing skills. What methods, tools, what did you do on the what, and what was the impact? The quantify impact, perhaps. Quantifiable impact, everyone wants to see numbers, percentage of improvement, percentage of improvement in efficiency, that kind of thing. But you want to emphasize the what you did, the process by which you did it, emphasizing the skills, and the impact you had with the approach that you took. Okay, does that make sense? So let's practice. So in academia, we might say something like, I developed a simulation of a condensed matter system. I actually don't know if that's a thing. I think I asked AI if that was like, if that made sense, right? But when we do the who phrasing, it's I built a computational model. That's what I did. Reducing simulation time by 40%. That was the outcome. And the secondary outcome, enabling faster decision making. You can see where it's emphasizing that you did a thing that had an impact and that an employer may want to see. That's a skill that you're bringing. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. All right. If you have a piece of paper, you can use paper. If you have your phone, you can just use phone. I'm going to give you like 3 minutes to write out some bullet points based on whatever it is that you're doing. This is not something that has to go on your resume. I just want you to get in the habit of practicing thinking about your work and translating it to a who method resume point. So first, I want you to think about like a sentence you would write in just academic terms. Like, what did you do? Like, what is your work about? Or whatever. And then how would you update with that? With who? And then after you have a couple minutes to do your own work, then I'm gonna have you work with a couple people around you. And then we're gonna share out the best ones to the big group, okay? So get your papers out, your phones out, whatever. And I'll try to understand the efforts that you do. Thank you. Now what I'd like you to do is turn to one or two people around you, depending on how you're seated, and share your bullet points, right? Describe in just academic parlance how you would describe your work. And then I want you to share your beautiful who bullet point. And then as you're listening to your partner, think about how do you, if you were a hiring manager, if you were a recruiter, how would you interpret that and offer them feedback? With what could they do to improve the language? I should have put this, sorry. But here are some of the active words that you could use. And so as you're offering feedback, if there's something a little more dynamic, a little more accurate, that could inspire the bullet point and offer that kind of feedback, okay? Questions? All right, have at. Find a friend. Who's got one? I know somebody's got something that they'd like to do. This is your chance to brag and introduce yourself to the other people in the room about the skills and impact you've made.
I suppose.
Yes, thank you. Brave soul in row 2.
Okay, so do you want both of them?
Yes, okay, so how would you describe it in sort of just generic academics?
So the academic terms created a Monte Carlo simulation which modeled the decay positions of radon daughters in a liquid xenon time projection chamber in order to veto false signals.
While that sounds fascinating, if I were a recruiter, I'm like, okay, sounds good. How would you put that into a bullet point?
Developed a computer simulation to filter out false signals in sensitive equipment, increasing confidence in our data analysis.
What do we think? Make a strong bullet point.
Anyone can understand it?
It was right. It was really easy to understand. It demonstrated quantifiable impact, right? What did it do? It built confidence in the data. Okay. What else? What else makes that stand out as a strong bullet point? It was a lot shorter, more concise. Being concise is critical for your resume bullet points for sure. And the thing to remember is when you simplify your work in ways that are more easily understood by a variety of audiences, that doesn't take away from the depth of your knowledge. What that does is invite people to ask for more information, right? He could talk more specifically about the computer simulation that you developed. If you happen to be talking to someone who was into that and was knowledgeable about that. But it demonstrates impact then that a recruiter or a hiring manager or somebody could say, oh, well, this is potentially applicable to a different project or a different team, right? So keeping it kind of broader is helpful for the job search process. All right, who's got another bullet point that they're excited or willing to share, even if you're not excited about it?
Nobody wants a job.
No, yeah, nobody wants a job. No, his neighbor wants a job. Let's hear it.
I'll just read out my bullet point.
Okay, great.
Created computational models to predict scatterings for point scatterers on titanium mirror coatings to predict reduction of coating thermal noise.
Okay, so that's still very technical, but yet significantly less technical than I'm guessing you would describe it to audiences that are within your same sphere, correct? Okay, great. All right, do you understand what we're getting at with the who point bullet points? When you get to the point where you're refining your resume, and certainly when you are applying for jobs, it's good to have multiple people read it. And we'll put the resources we have for that later. But get in the habit of practicing writing these bullet points throughout, just because then they'll be much easier for you to do when you have to produce a resume for a specific job. But it also helps them with that mindset shift. It's not just the knowledge that you're gaining through your research and through your education, but is there a skill associated with the education that I'm having? If so, how would I describe that skill? How would I describe my engagement with that skill and the impact that I have? These words actually come from a book that the MSU Career Services Network publishes every year. And so there are copies of these floating around on campus and they're worth grabbing just because this is a very handy guide for giving you a variety of action-oriented verbs that you're gonna wanna use in the resume bullet point writing. Does anyone, who has heard of an applicant tracking system? Hands are going up. ATS, applicant tracking systems, are computer systems that most industries use to filter resumes and help identify candidates that they want to interview for roles, right? This is critical for you to know because even once your resume appears in front of a live person whose eyeballs are going to look at all of the beautiful bullet points that you've composed, people look at resumes for between 3 to 7 seconds. And that's after it has been scanned by a computer. Okay, so this is why you have to do the job to make sure that your resume passes muster. Knowing that, one of the key things that they do when they're programming these ATSs is they are looking for keywords from a job posting. And if your resume does not have the keywords that they're looking for, it doesn't matter how relevant your experience is, it's not going to see it as resume. That hand I see from Paula? Yes.
Maybe a difficult question, but do you have any idea how the new generation of AI, ChatGPT and such, can impact that, because I'm thinking that if I am in that position and I'm hired to filter resumes to hire people in a company, I will probably literally just upload a zip file of all the resumes that I got into ChatGPT and say, this is the description of the job that we got, read them and give me an ordering that makes sense. And I will trust that way more than a system that is looking for matching keywords. So
Matching keywords. So certainly that is, yes, AI is upending a lot of this, and I'm actually gonna talk about AI in a second. We can talk about AI more at the end, but specifically to your question, one of the reasons why, one of the conversations that is happening around AI is sort of the legality, and companies are very sort of wary about dumping personal information from resumes into an AI model that is not fully proprietary. Whereas their ATS systems are more locked down within a human resources framework. So yes, that is definitely on the frontier of something that's likely to happen. Right now, recruiters are saying they're still using their old systems because they're just not sure that it has the privacy associated that is expected with the job search process. So that's kind of where we are now, but it's certainly changing every day. So yes, keywords from job postings, and we're going to do more of that here in a second. Avoid complex formatting and graphics, right? At the most, you're going to want to use bullet points, because when things go through the ATS system, if you've got them embedded in invisible tables and stuff like that, it really messes up the legibility of your resume, and you don't want to, accidentally take yourself out of the running. Keep it clean and professional. And there's a little trick that somebody, usually every time we talk about this, there's someone in the room who says, I saw this thing on the Insta-Tick reels, as I call them, where somebody said you can just copy the job posting and then copy it onto your resume in tiny white font so that when it does the scan, it has all the keywords, right? Because you literally hid the job posting in your resume. Don't do that, because guess what? Recruiters also watch the Insta-Tick reels, and they know, they're like, no. So the computers actually filter that out, and then they'll sometimes like highlight everything and then expose your ruse. So don't do that, even if it seems like a good way around the ATS system. Don't do it. Okay, update your resume every time. I've said it before, say it now. When you're actively job searching, if it feels like the act of getting a job is a full-time job in and of itself, that's completely normal. It does take time, but that's why you want to invest in having excellent materials for the job you're going after, not going after like every job under the sun. Okay, now I don't know how legible this is, but we're going to try this. Here's a job I found that looks sort of interesting. Some of you might have the relevant skill set. Interestingly, I found this on LinkedIn, and the way the LinkedIn algorithm posted it, it gently reminded me that I actually did not have any of the qualifications for this job, which I thought was very nice of it, since I don't have the relevant experience or education. But thank you, LinkedIn. But some of you might. So I wanted to take a minute, and it's multi-pages, but we'll just look at this one. Take a minute and see if you can read it. Read this job ad and sort of what jumps out to you. And if you were gonna compose a resume to go after this kind of job, specifically what I'm gonna highlight, I'll give you a minute. This is a lot to read, and it's an incredibly small font, but what jumps out to you? Do you see any like patterns in the kinds of skills they're looking for? Anything that is unusual for a job ad that we want to draw our attention to? Yes.
I guess I haven't looked at a lot of industry job postings, but the who you are is really interesting.
Yes, it is very interesting. Why did you find it interesting?
Instead of just, I mean, they also give the list of all the things that they want, but like them describing their ideal candidate. In second person, I don't know. It's just very striking.
Very striking, right? Did that jump out to anybody else? So the fact that the way they talk about themselves is interesting and signals something about their company culture and how much they value their company culture, right? That emphasis on sort of team activities and fun and, right? So they're trying to communicate to potential applicants that they have a positive kind of collegial culture, but it's also signaling to you as an applicant that that's something that you should value as well, right? And so then you might think to yourself, I'm going to try to communicate and emphasize teamwork, right? Leadership within a group, that kind of thing, because that's important. And then who you are, data performance guru, technologically savvy, what you need to succeed. So the keywords that you're going to be looking for are anything that are very specifically technical. And that should, you know, if you're going to go after a job for that, you should know like, oh yeah, that is a very specific technical skill set that they want. You definitely want to make sure that appears in your resume as long as you have it. Don't lie and say you do if you don't, right? You can also use their own verbs to inspire your bullet points. But this is what we mean about tailoring your resume to a job ad. Now, one way that you can very appropriately use AI technology is I copied this job ad into ChatGPT and asked it with a prompt that act as a recruiter, blah, 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 blah. I asked it to, oh dear. Broken it. I'll do this. Let me need you.
The thing stop working?
I don't know. It doesn't want to work for me. All right. So I asked it to summarize the job ad, and specifically I said, what areas should I emphasize in my resume? Right. And this is what AI said were things that were repeated often enough that a theme emerged and that you're going to want to emphasize when you're trying to sell yourself as a candidate for this role, right? Continuous improvement mindset was one example. Collaboration and mentoring, that emphasis on teamwork, company culture, working in a group. Problem solving and communication. Every job you apply for wants to see problem solving and communication. They want to hire people who can recognize a challenge, jump in and try to solve it within their area of expertise, and then kind of assess their impact and adaptability into integration. Right? Problem solving, communication, and adaptability. Anytime you can emphasize those things, most jobs are going to value that. Oh wait, I have the same one. Anyway, so that's a totally appropriate use within the job search landscape for AI. Copy a job ad over, ask it to decide what you should emphasize, and then use that to like start refining your job, your resume to the job ad you're going for. Okay. That's what I meant by let's practice. We just practiced. Okay. Common resume mistakes that I want you to avoid. Too long, too detailed, right? You want it specific, legible. You want it speaking to the job ad so that any recruiter who is going to spend 3 to 7 seconds on it is going to say, this is what we're looking for in the job. And this is the person that has everything that we need. We should definitely bring them in for an interview. Don't just list tasks you've done, list your impact, the outcomes of the WHO method, right? And your achievements. Overly technical jargon. We saw what an improvement that was in your bullet points from what could have been this very academic specific, that deep part of the T into something that was more accessible to a wider variety of audiences. Ignoring transferable skills. You're going to want to emphasize, those are your boundary spanning competencies we talked about. Those are good for all jobs. Obvious use of AI. So I was talking to a recruiter not that long ago, and she said, of the 12 candidates that she was forwarded from HR, 8 of them had an almost identical cover. She said, that tells me they all put the same prompt into ChatGPT. It turned out a cover letter and they did not even bother to try to personalize it or refine it. And she said, I didn't even look beyond that. Because if they're going to be so lazy as to make their use of these technologies obvious, then they're not the kind of candidates we're looking for. So if you use AI, use it as a starting off point, but then make sure you take it from there. Yes.
Okay. I do use like those online resume builder sites.
Yes.
Do those just because like I'm too lazy to do the formatting. Like,
okay.
Is it just better to just do it in Word or like?
It's better to, I will say it's better to do it in Word, and it doesn't have to be fancy. I mean, you saw the one I showed up, it was not that fancy. But the reason the resume templates that you can download and fill in are sometimes a problem is because they have all of this clunky, like hidden back end stuff that when it gets pulled into an ATS system, it can jumble it, it can make it look weird. So it looks fine on your end, but then when the computer reads it, it like moves stuff around in a way that makes it illegible. I would just cross it over into a basic Microsoft Word thing. It doesn't have to be fancy. Canva looks pretty, but that's not what they're looking for. Something just very black and white, straightforward is gonna ultimately be more effective. Yeah.
You know, if like a basic LaTeX format also messes stuff up, because like I use a bunch of LaTeX, like basic formats for like CVs and stuff like.
I mean, that in theory, that should be fine because the code is relatively clean in theory, right? Right? What you don't want is just like all of the sort of design stuff that comes through in some of like sort of the prettier templates that people use. As we talk about it, and the tricks, yeah, the tricks, don't, that hidden white language at the bottom that I talked about earlier. Okay. So now you, oh yes, questions before we move off of resumes.
How do you highlight skills like teamwork and leadership in a resume?
How do you highlight skills like teamwork and leadership in a resume? So let's imagine, so let's think about an opportunity that you've had as a grad student, or maybe as you've had as an undergraduate, that you think would be an example of teamwork or leadership. Someone have an example?
Like student org.
Being in a student org, right? Maybe you helped coordinate one of the big symposiums. I know you have symposia here. Maybe you were a student on that committee and you could say like student liaison to some leadership committee. I coordinated a 3-day symposium, including 7 Nobel laureates and blah, 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 right? That shows teamwork and leadership. What else? You want to emphasize verbs that refer to teamwork and leadership. You know, obviously like led, initiated, that's an evidence of leadership. Instigated, created. The language should hint at that, but also make sure that you're emphasizing the team impact that you have, right? If you trained undergraduates, as you become a more advanced graduate student, that mentoring and teaching can be an example of teamwork and leadership, right? Mentored a group of 3 undergraduates to whatever that is, right? That's an emphasis on teamwork as well. Okay, so you've done such a great job on your resume that you got invited to an interview. So now we're going to talk a little bit about interviews. There's different types of interviews that you may encounter: behavioral, case and problem solving, and then technical, right? Depending on the role that you're applying for, you may get to experience one or more of these, right? If you're going for a specific technical role, has anyone done a technical interview? Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
How would you describe it?
It was like a code test.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So what they have you do?
They gave us some problems and had to write out pseudocode. So I guess it's closer to problem solving, but
Okay.
it was.
Yeah. I mean, if you're
coding.
Yeah, you had to actually sit and code.
Yeah.
That's a common one, certainly. Or if you're doing, it's like, you know, I've heard in financial systems, they'll give you like a sample data set and then you have to like develop how would you model this, for example. So they just want to know that you can actually do the technical work for a role that you're applying for. So again, don't ever rely on your resume, but certainly about technical skills that you claim to have that they may want to test you on, right? Case and problem solving. Has anyone done a case interview? If you've ever applied for like a consulting gig, that's all they do. Like people spend weeks preparing for case interviews. That's like theoretical, like how would you approach this? And then they're kind of wild. The most common is going to be a behavioral interview. Almost any job you apply for.
Do the case interviews often give you materials in advance to prep for? Or, okay.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It kind of depends what they're looking for. It can be both. Because in some cases, they are having you solve problems with a team of people, and they're assessing not only how you approach it, but how you interact with other people. They are a system unto themselves, and they're very common in the business world for like very businessy type of stuff. It's a street in Broad. They spend a lot of time on case interviewing. For simplicity's sake, today we're going to focus more on the behavioral interviews, right? So here are some common interview questions. Tell me about yourself. That's a class. We're gonna model that. Next, okay. Describe a time you manage a project. How do you handle ambiguity? Why do you want to work? These are the kind of behavioral questions that you would expect from most interviews.
What is ambiguity?
Say there what?
What is ambiguity?
Oh, ambiguity is something that you had where you weren't sure, like maybe you didn't have all the information, maybe you had to decide without specific instructions. Like, so what did you do if your boss asked you to do something and you weren't actually sure what the next step should be? You know, the answer could be, I asked. The answer could be, I did nothing until I waited and was told what to do. That should not be your answer, right? But yeah, that's what they're looking for there. Okay, so we're gonna start with the first one. Tell me about yourself. Here's an example. I tried to make it both specific and very vague, right? So I am a, what are you? How do you want to start out? Usually it's going to be like, what is your professional identity as it relates to the role you're interviewing for? If you are not, if you're looking to make a switch, this is your chance where you can talk about making that switch. So some just basic information. It's okay if it's a very quick cursory review of what's on your resume. But then you want to shift into some important takeaway points where you make your experience relevant to the person you're talking to. Sometimes you may want to jazz it up, add a little personal information. Outside of work, I enjoy doing this. And then you want to sort of summarize it up in a neat little bow, emphasizing that you are the perfect person for the role that you're interviewing for. The key, make it appropriate. It should always be appropriate. If you have inappropriate outside of work activities, do not mention them. Do not mention them, right? It's inappropriate by business standards. I'm not judging anyone. I'm just saying, don't bring weird stuff into your, okay? Make it true. You don't want to talk about your lifelong passion for the cello if you don't play the cello, right? Because it will come back and bite you. You'll eventually work for somebody who is also a cellist, and then you're like in an awkward spot, right? Make it memorable. If there's something that's particularly interesting about you, this would be a great chance to introduce it, because I've been in enough searches in my time, and it's like, wait, who was that physicist who's also a classical pianist? It's Pablo, right? Right? Like I remember somebody talking about who was that. That kind of memorable detail can really help you stand out. This is a calling card. This is an opening. You are starting the conversation and setting the tone for the conversation that you're having. Right? Don't make it so dry. Don't make it just a recap of your resume. Tell them who you are as a person and communicate your enthusiasm for the role. So, hold on. I'm gonna go back. Pablo had offered to help. So let's practice this, right? Pablo, you want to come down here? You want to do it from back there?
Of course.
Yes. So we're going to practice the tell me about yourself. And then I'm going to give you all a chance to do that. All right. Pablo. Hello. Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in. We're so delighted to have you interview for this position. So tell me about yourself. It's not a strong start, but you can, you're going to be better prepared. Okay.
So I am a nuclear theorist, and I am an educator. I work at a nuclear lab at Michigan State. I come from Latin America. My entire family is from there, and I came to do my PhD in physics here. And I'm a very exciteful person. I really like to work with people. Most of the time I don't get excited about the things, but rather on how other people get excited about the things. And that has made me being able to play with a lot of. I have a dog. His name is Iraq, and he's super cute. And I play the piano. I don't know if you have heard.
Remember about that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then if I was interviewing for a specific job, you might say like, oh, what I loved about this job was this gives me a chance to work with people more, right? Or like bring this enthusiasm to a sales job or whatever it is, right? So you kind of want to like loop it back in to what you're applying.
And I have been working a lot with people in the work that I had, so I think I will fit very well in here, given the description that you gave.
Exactly, perfect, yes, the super vague description I just gave.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic, let's give Papa a round of applause. Yeah, yes, I'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
All right, who else wants to give it a shot? We're not gonna do it in pairs, we're gonna, yes, you wanna come up and do it? All right, so should I make up a job?
Sure. Why not?
Okay, while you're sitting, let's crowdsource. Who wants to come up with a job? What is your name?
Gabe.
Gabe, that we're gonna pretend Gabe is applying for. Anyone, you can think of a job that you might want to do.
Sort of scientific.
Like a software engineer at a gaming company.
Software engineer. I'm assuming that he has at least some experience that he can. Okay, Gabe, so it's so lovely to meet you. I'm Julie. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, so you're interviewing for the software consultant at a gaming company. Tell me about yourself.
Well, professionally, I am an experimental nuclear physicist. I've done a lot of stuff with figuring out kind of the shape of nuclei, but what's relevant for this job is actually it involves simulating a lot of physical systems. That's one of my favorite things. It's kind of been a through line throughout my career, whether it be from all the way from undergrad to graduate school. And my most favorite thing is making simulations like this. And in your position, as you listed, actually, you're looking for a game physics engineer. And so it kind of merges my two loves. Outside of physics, I really enjoy music. I had a minor of it undergrad, and a kind of cool little overlap I see. So I play a bunch of instruments, but I also like to compose my own stuff. And like music theory alongside nuclear theory and all that stuff, there are some models that are relevant for some things, and some that are not so good at others. And figuring out the kind of parts that work really well to make a beautiful symphony or a beautiful model is part of the fun.
Did you make that up for him, or did you think of that on the spot?
Oh, no, I know him.
Oh, okay. So what kind of feedback would we give Gabe? If you were hiring for a game consultant for something, whatever. There was gaming consulting, okay. What kind of feedback could we give Gabe?
The job.
Huh? Yeah, you got the job, right? Salary. Okay.
I think like the hobby that you have outside of work is more of like an artistic endeavor, which sort of goes hand in hand with like developing a video game.
Yeah.
Like there's the technical aspects, and then there's also like the artistic
yeah.
and more sort of like subjective side to building games.
And you tied them together beautifully,
Yeah.
right? Okay, what else jumped out for you?
Maybe just spend like 1 or 2 more sentences on emphasizing how the skills you have with simulating are the same skills for simulating a game.
Yeah. Very well done, Gabe. You're hired. Glad I can phone, I can take the rest of the day off. Fantastic. Okay, thanks again. All right. One more, if somebody else wants to take a stab. Does anyone want to tell us about themselves? I mean, he really set a high bar. But for who's feeling brave? Great, come on up. All right, now I need another sample job that we're gonna inflict. What is your name?
Francisco.
Francisco. Okay, what kind of job should we think? Okay, Pablo has one.
Managing the MSU data store.
Managing the MSU data.
A store, like the ice cream store. Ice cream.
Okay. Yeah, the dairy store, like the ice cream store. Sorry, I misheard you. Okay, Francisco, hi, I'm Julie. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in. We're so excited that you're interested in managing the dairy store.
Oh, yeah, so
About yourself.
professionally, I'm gonna make quite the jump from working on superconducting magnets to managing. Because, throughout my life, I used to work at a high school place when I was in high school and part of my undergrad. And I also worked as a tutor at a high school, also part of my undergrad. So I already have a lot of experience working with people, especially younger people, since most of the students most of the people that work at their store, they're students. They already know how to handle them. And, I like working with people. It's something that I enjoy. That's why I made the jump from doing wonderful research, very wonderful research, to just managing a dairy store at a
What kind of feedback do we have?
Magnets are cold and ice cream.
Magnets are cold and ice cream is as well, okay.
I don't know if I would say jumping from something great to something, oh, just this. I feel like that's might be insulting to me.
Okay, yep, good point. I actually, oh, great, yes.
Didn't you work at a Whataburger? You could have said like, oh, I used to work here and then I
work at a fashion.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That was a fantastic, fantastic one. And what I really liked, oh yeah, we've got another hand.
I can already hear you're overqualified.
Yes, but what I loved about the way that you answered that, because you started out this way and then you kind of went away from it and then you kind of brought it back, was answering the question of why would you make this transition? Right? When you're looking to make a big leap, or what you don't necessarily see as a big leap, but someone else might, it's incumbent on you to answer the question of like, why would you want to go from physics to managing a dairy store? And you said, I had, this prior work experience working in fast food, and also you are good and enjoy working with younger people. I was like, okay, so then that makes sense, right? He had this brief foray into magnets and physics, and then you realize his true passion and calling was working with food and young people, right? So you did a really nice job of starting out that way and kind of bringing it back at the end. So well done. Yes, I think you might be a little overqualified. You can see where with some practice, and I encourage you to practice so that when someone asks this question, tell me about yourself, you can have you sort of just like launch into your sort of signature story. Okay, questions on that? Yes.
What do recruiters still think about disguising your strengths as weaknesses?
Like, I'm just too dedicated to work. That's my weakness. Like they interview people all the time. I think it's just sort of as an eye roller, like just whatever, right? It's better to be authentic about something that you actually, it shows self-awareness to talk about something that you actually struggle with, as long as then you position it as something that you're working on, or that you can kind of pivot to a strength for that role, right? Like, I don't know, maybe something like, like my brain is constantly going in a million different directions. And so that actually was a really big challenge for me when I was working on my PhD, because I just really had to focus so much. But actually in a role like this, where you might be expecting me to manage multiple different projects, I think that my brain's natural orientation would actually be a strength in that role, even though in some domains of my life, it's a challenge. Right? You can see where it's like actually potentially a weakness that you kind of position as a strength versus just like, oh, I just care too much about work. You don't want your recruiter to roll their eyes for sure. Other questions? All right. So we talked a bit about this a minute ago, but these are the kind of boundary spanning competencies that employers really value. And so you're going to want to be able to communicate these during an interview. How are we going to 15 minutes. Okay. So the STAR method is a really commonly used technique for answering behavioral questions. The question being, tell me about a time when, right? Tell me about a time when you had to make a decision in the face of ambiguity. Tell me about a time when your boss was disappointed, and what did you do? The STAR method, when you apply it to your response, what it does is helps you from rambling, and it helps make sure that you're answering in a cohesive way. So first, the S is you're explaining the situation. They don't need every single detail about every person who was involved in the situation, but you want to give them some context so that they understand what you're describing and your role in it. So the situation. The next is the task, the problem, the issue, what you were asked to do, how you approached the problem. The A is the actions you took. And the R is the result. Ideally, it's a positive outcome, but it can also be a negative outcome, as long as then you add the caveat about, here's what I learned and applied it. Questions about the STAR method in general before we attempt to practice it? I can put this back up as we move into it. Do you want to practice with like pairs or do we like the big group practice? I'm open to either because we only have 15 minutes left. Pairs? Oh, are you going to stay on task? You like what, like the volunteer? Okay, who votes for a volunteer up in the front? Oh, no one wants to be called on to, okay, who'd like to practice with somebody near them? Okay, that's the most hands, so we'll do that. That's all right. So what I would like you to do is find just one other person in the interest of time. Here are some sample behavioral questions. So take a quick look before I go back to the STAR about a question, and then I would like ideally for each of you to ask each other, and then you practice responding using the STAR method. Understand? Your favorite interview question. And I'll give you answer. How'd that go in general? Do you feel like you had a chance to sort of practice? Any questions about how that went?
How long should the entire answer be? Because I can see the percentages, but.
Yeah. I guess it depends. I would say no longer than like a minute, probably, maybe 2 tops. You don't want to bore the person listening to you or get so mired in the details. So a minute's actually a pretty long time. Starting with that, and you know, and if they want you to elaborate, they'll ask you to, but you kind of want to have a nice little concrete answer.
I guess I'm a bit confused how you do S and T without them overlapping into each other.
Well, it doesn't have to be separate. They kind of overlap, right? This is just it's sort of like a thought process to go through so that you cover all of that. So like the situation is, it could be, you know, setting stage. I was an intern at a dairy company when I was starting my ice cream career, right? And I was only there for the summer, right? And then I was, you know, there mopping floors at the end of the evening. Oh, went out, right? And I didn't know, so that's the situation. I was an intern at the dairy operation. The problem that arose was this, and then it was like, here's what I did, and here's the result. Okay. Yes, I saw a hand in the back.
Do you think recruiters prefer more of like a career-oriented answer, like, oh, this was a situation that was part of my job that kind of happened, or are they okay with like a personal, like, oh, this was a hard time with like a family situation or a financial situation or something like that?
So both can be effective. A personal one can make you stand out. A personal one can also get real weird real fast. So that is the thing to be mindful of, right? I'd be very cautious about using like a family example or a financial example, because you can accidentally make yourself look a certain way that you're not intending. So like that's sort of caution I would use there. Now, maybe you've had experiences like you were on a 6-month backpacking adventure and you encountered something like that. You can position to make yourself a hero of the story in a way that can be inspiring and not weird. But like the family financial dynamics can accidentally be perceived in a negative way, even if you don't intend to be. So tread lightly, I'd say. I saw some hands over here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, building off of that, like, do you think they would rather see something extracurricular or something like already talked about in your resume or like your cover letter, or something a little bit more academic?
If all you have to best answer the question is something that's in your resume, you can say, well, I know, you know, or like on my resume talks about this role, and then you can emphasize that. This is an opportunity to bring in additional depth to your experience. So whenever you can artfully and effectively do that, that's always a good thing. that really helps you sort of flesh you out as a candidate. The documents don't. But ultimately, you don't want to spend so much time like thinking of the perfect response that you waste your time or have it be awkward. Green shirt in the back, then you, and then you. Okay.
Okay, so after they ask this question and you answer with the STAR method,
Yes.
hopefully they ask for some follow-up or expanding on the story or whatever, but the flow of the whole interview, will eventually stop and ask another question, or how should you continue it after the minute storytelling?
It's kind of, ideally, as you practice this more, when you deliver it effectively, it's going to kind of have this like wrapped up neat little, and then this is how I solve the problems of the world, right? And they may ask you follow-up questions, or it really depends on the recruiter and how the interview process goes, or they may move on to the next question. And you don't necessarily have to read anything into that. It's just a process question on how the company might do it, right? They may be required to ask the same 5 questions of every candidate. So they may just sort of jump through those questions. Sometimes it'll be more conversational where they'll be like, oh, wow, that sounds really difficult. Thank you, whatever. So there will be follow-up questions. It's just hard to know if it's going to build off of what you just said or if they're just going to move through the process.
Okay.
All right, you were next.
Yeah, so sort of to piggyback off of you mentioning like not taking too long. How do you balance, like, say someone asks you a question that you really weren't expecting,
right,
and like you have a first thought that comes to mind and you sort of see the general shape of how you would say it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the best example, or if you thought longer, you could come up with a better one. Like, I guess balancing how well you feel you can deliver on a certain like anecdote or experience versus thinking of a better idea, but maybe having to stumble through it a little bit.
So it's okay. It's really quite fine if you're really caught off guard. You can say, that's a good question. Let me think for a second. And then give yourself a couple minutes. You just don't want it to be so prolonged that then everyone's checking their phone or like what's, like making it weird, right? So you feel free. You don't have to have everything so pat and at the ready like that. You can ask for a minute to think so that you can refine your answer. And it's okay if it's not this like beautifully eloquent, pre-rehearsed STAR method response. But the more you practice this, the more you'll get in the habit of sort of telling these little vignettes. Really, it's really like a story arc. If you've studied literature, there's these like sort of tropes and arcs and that this is just an interview technique that can be applicable. But it's okay to take some time, think about how you want to answer it, if that's what makes sense. Okay, one more question.
How do you I really do hate these questions because one, it takes me a long time to think of the right example, but also I feel like I respond to any conflicts or situations in the workplace normally. Tell me about a time when you overcame this and you're like, oh, I just worked harder. But how do you phrase it that it's not such a common answer that everybody's gonna get
because
it's just a common.
To say you work harder is not really an answer.
Or just I read more about it and then I asked more questions and then I fulfilled the tasks.
Right. Well, I think you can answer it that way and say okay, I was asked to do this task and I wasn't initially sure how to respond. Right. I was new to the lab and I was asked to do this thing and I actually didn't quite know how to do it. So I did what I usually do. I went home and I read as much as I could find. Right, figuring out maybe there's some additional information that's going to help me know how to tackle this problem. And once I had done that, I realized I still had some questions. So I went to the lab manager and asked for clarifying questions. And then once I had that information, I felt confident to try it. And so then I took that information and I did it this way, and it actually did not work that first time. So then I went back and asked a different person, what did I do wrong? And so that's how I approach solving problems when I don't have all of the information. I try to get as much information on my own, then I start asking questions, and then I start doing.
It's okay if it's not some big situation that you really had to triple.
Yes, right. Nothing has to be the very specific big thing. But the way I sort of modeled that answer, that's going to tell someone how you approach your work. Right. And ultimately, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for the most amazing story ever. Right. They're trying to get a sense of how you approach your work, how you approach situations that are ambiguous, how you approach areas where there's conflict, right? If you have conflict in your team, tell me about a time when there was conflict between you and your boss and what you did. Your answer could be, I left work early and I went and worked out. I came back the next day and I started the conversation after we had had a chance to cool off, right? Like whatever, that could be an answer. There's most of these, there's not one right or wrong answer. What you're trying to do is reflect yourself honestly and in a way that communicates how you work and who you would be as an employee. I have a couple more slides and then I promise, oh, okay, super fast. We'll skip that. Where to find job, we're gonna skip that. Networking, you need to do more of that. I can come back and talk about that another time. That is how most people find jobs. You have to remember. Industries that hire, blah, 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 networking, we're not gonna do that. Okay, some resources I want you to know about, and then I promise I'm done. Beyond the Professoriate is an online platform that we pay for you to have access to. You can go through, there's excellent resources that will walk you through any facets of exploring potential career outcomes, preparing for going on the job market, all that. Make sure you sign in using your Michigan State University credentials. Otherwise, it's going to ask you to pay. PhD students do not pay. We pay for you. You just have to log in through the MSU access point. Interview prep is a tool that's accessible through Handshake. I'll talk about Handshake in a second. It allows you to be fed very common interview questions. It records your answer, and then you can watch it back and cringe at how you answered. You can also share it with other people for feedback. Excellent tool to take advantage of well before you need it so that you know how you come across, especially with like AI interviewing. And there's most initial interview screens are happening mediated through technology. And so this is a way that you can start practicing that. And for our PhD students, we have 2 career advisors working with me this year, Emma and LJ. You can make an appointment with them through Handshake, which is a career support platform that MSU uses. They can review your resumes. They can talk about a job search strategy. They can answer your questions. They can be your career best friend. You can make an appointment with them. And then next step, rest. Okay. That's all I have because I'm over time. I'm happy to stay here until the break is over and answer if there's additional questions, but I also know some of you are like, I'm out.
Thank you very much.
You're
It was
welcome.
great, and I would love to invite you back sometime, but I also want to emphasize the